Well, thank you very much for being here. Obviously, you're very popular. Have you ever thought about becoming an American citizen and running for president? You're in the right age category. No? You're not old enough yet?
I'm not old enough yet.
Okay, all right. So thank you very much for coming here, and we're going to go through a lot of what you've done and the things that make you so popular. But on your last name, that kind of describes everything, Goodall. So you ever thought of changing to Good for All because you're doing so many other things, or Great All, or?
We do have on our website Good for All News, which is because I truly believe that the media, we need to know the doom and the gloom. We do, but why don't they give more time to the amazing people, wonderful projects around the world that you read and people will say, wow, they did that. Well, we could do it too. Okay, well, you're inspired a lot of people. No doubt a lot of people here have read about what you've done. Let's go through how this came about at the outset. So you grew up in London, or in England. England. And when you were 1 year old, you were given a book or something about chimpanzees. Is that true? Or? It was my father, who I really didn't know because it was just before World War II, and he joined up as soon as war was declared. But he gave me a stuffed chimpanzee, Jubilee. He was named for the first chimpanzee born in the London Zoo, and the Jubilee of Queen George and Mary, I suppose. And I took him everywhere with me. But people have the misapprehension that because of that, I studied chimpanzees. It wasn't true. I mean, we didn't know anything about chimpanzees. It was just that Jubilee was a wonderful, wonderful, I still have him.
Okay, so if you've been given a different animal, a panda or something, or still been interested in chimpanzees, right?
Well, the chimpanzee interest began, I finally saved up money. I had to be a waitress. We had no money in my family, and we couldn't even afford university. So I did a boring old secretarial course. Then I got invited to Kenya by a school friend, and so I worked as a waitress to save up the fare. And so I would have studied any animal. I was 10 years old when my dream was, I'll go to Africa, live with wild animals and write books about them. Why? Because I was in love with Tarzan.
But you did that at 10 years old. So you told your mother you'd like to go to Africa and see the chimpanzees, and what did she say?
Not the chimpanzees, I would have studied anything.
Well, what did your mother say to anything? Did she just think you were...
My mother, I attribute a great deal of who I am and what I've done to the wise way that she brought me up. She was supportive. So when I said I wanted to go to Africa, everybody laughed at me. How will you do that? Africa's far away, you don't have money, it's dangerous, and you're just a girl. Remember, this is going back 70 years now.
Okay, so eventually
my mother said, if you really want to do this, you're going to have to work really hard, take advantage of every opportunity, and if you don't give up, hopefully you find a way.
So the opportunity came along when you were a teenager, more or less?
I was, well, it would be the equivalent of a teenager today. I was actually 23, but after the...
You're saying equivalent of a mature teenager today.
Back then, I mean, today young people of 16, 18, they go off and they go to other countries and they volunteer. It didn't happen after the war. So we were very, very naive. So yes, I went to Africa at 23.
Right, at 23, you had not yet gone to college?
No.
Okay, so you go to, how did you pay for that?
By working as a waitress.
Okay.
And I was with a group of, they were all professional waiters and waitresses, and they were Catholics, very, very Catholic from Ireland. And so it was my first opportunity of being in a completely new culture.
Right. So you saved your money and you told your parents you're really going to Africa. They didn't say, well, that was nice to talk about it, but you really can't do it. They really didn't care if you went. Is that right?
Well, my father was out of it. He was still, away. They divorced.
Right.
And it was my mother. And, she just said, well, stick with it if you want to do it. And you know how many people have written to me and said, Jane, I want to thank you because you did it. I can do it too.
Okay, so you did this at the age of 23. You go to, how did you pick which part of Africa? How did you get to Tanzania, for example?
Well, because my friend's parents had bought a farm in Kenya, and while I was there, I met the famous paleontologist Louis Leakey, and he gave me this opportunity to go and study not just any animal, but the one most like us, chimpanzee. I would have studied a mouse if I could be out in the African bush.
So Louis Leakey was the famous paleontologist who more or less came up with a theory that humans pretty much evolved out of southern Africa.
Yeah.
And he was famous for that. And did you get to know him, or how did you?
Very well, because, you know, I told you I had to do that boring secretarial course. When I heard about Louis Leakey and went to see him, his secretary had just left and he needed a secretary. There I was, so I'm right now surrounded by people who can answer all my questions about the animals and the birds and everything. And
so at one point you said, I really want to go live with the chimpanzees.
no, I didn't.
Okay. As I said, you didn't say that, right? What did you say?
I told him I really wanted to study animals.
Okay.
And for some reason, although I hadn't been to college, he believed that I could do what he'd been looking for someone for 10 years, he told me, to go and study not just any animal, but our closest living relatives, the chimpanzees.
Okay, so he said, okay, eventually, how long had you worked for him before he said you could do this?
A year.
A year. So he said, okay, you're going to do this, but did he just give you guidance or tell you where to go? Or
No, he didn't have money, so it took him a year to get the money. Tanzania, where the chimps were and are, was still part of the British protectorate, and the authorities, the British authorities said, we won't take responsibility for this young girl. But Leakey never gave up. So in the end they said, yes, but she can't come alone. So who volunteered? That same amazing, supportive mother.
your mother came all the way with you? Then,
Well, I was back in England by that time.
okay.
And so she came with me, and she was amazing.
Your mother came with you to Africa to study the chimpanzees?
Well, she didn't do the study. She looked after the camp.
Okay. All right. So eventually you go to Gombe, is that right? And why did you pick there?
Leakey picked it because Leakey was studying early humans, and many of them, the remains, you know, the fossils were found on lake shores. And these chimpanzees, the ones that we're still studying today, 63 years, are on the shores of Lake Tanganyika, which is that huge long lake that runs south to north in Africa.
All right.
So he picked the place.
All right. So
he picked the chimpanzee.
How did you get there?
With difficulty. Well, when I first went to Africa, the planes weren't many. This was 1956 when I first went. And so we went, I alone went by boat.
You went by boat to Gombe.
No, I went by boat to stay with my friend on the farm in Kenya. And because there was a war between England and Egypt, the Suez Canal was closed. So instead of going through the Suez Canal like this, we had to go all the way around Cape Town. It took about a month.
Oh, wow.
And it was, this was one of the things, other than World War II, which I think made a big impact on me, because the first place we stopped was Cape Town, and it was so exciting. I've got my feet on African soil, and the iconic Table Mountain. But then I kept seeing this writing on the hotel doors and everywhere. What do these words mean in Afrikaans? White people only. And I was not brought up that way, to judge people by the color of their skin or their nationality. So I was very pleased to get to Kenya, which was just on the brink of independence from British colonial rule.
When you get there, you're by yourself, or your mother's still with you?
No, Mother hadn't come. This was the first time I went.
Okay. So
Mum was still safely back in the UK.
all right, so you're by yourself, you get there, and do you go to Orvis to get outfitted with all kinds of things? What do you wear? What kind of equipment do you bring to get ready to live with the chimpanzees?
Well, I wasn't ready. I hadn't met Leakey at that time.
Oh.
All I was doing was staying with my friend. The thing was, get to Africa. And
Okay.
while I was staying with her, I met Leakey. And that's when he suggested the chimps.
Okay.
And that's when it took a year for him to get the money. And that's when the British authorities said she has to come with somebody. And Mum volunteered.
All right, when you do get there to live with the chimpanzees, you're supposed to live with them, is that right?
Live with them and learn from them.
But do you get a tent or something? Or
A tent.
you had a tent, so were they dangerous? I mean, weren't you worried they might attack you?
Well, for me, we had an old ex-army tent, Mum and I between us. No nice sewn-in ground sheet and mosquito windows, nothing like that. And I would go happily up into the mountains every morning, following my dream. Mum would be left in the camp. And if you wanted air in that tent, you rolled up the side flaps and tied them with tape, and in came air, but also scorpions, spiders, snakes, which I didn't mind about, but poor Mum.
So you're there, I mean, how did you decide how long you were going to stay there? You're there to study them, but you could study for a day or two, a week, 25 years?
It was determined by the amount of money Lewis had managed to collect from an American philanthropist, 6 months. Leakey predicted that I would stay there 10 years. I thought, I was young. I thought, well, maybe 3 years. But we're now there 63 years later.
So, but you set up a tent, and how did you engage the chimpanzees? How did you kind of get close to them? How did you not worry about their attacking you? How did you befriend them?
With great difficulty. For 4 months. I remember I had money for 6 months. For 4 of those months, they ran away as soon as they saw me. And, I knew given time that I could win their trust, but did I have the time? The days turned to weeks, turned to months. And it was wonderful because what Mum did, she boosted my morale. She said, Jane, you found that peak. And with your binoculars, you're seeing how chimps wander around by themselves in small groups, big groups when there's a new food available. You're learning about the calls they make, the foods they eat, how they make nests at night. And so she really helped to boost my morale.
Right, so you weren't trained as a scientist, so you used your powers of observation to see what they were doing?
Yes, and my inborn love of animals, my curiosity, my fascination. Leakey told me nothing. He never even visited Gombe.
He never visited?
No, well, he was not physically very fit, and I think he felt he couldn't. I mean, it's very hilly. It's a mountain ridge,
So when you go to see the chimpanzees, you first engage them. Do you give them some food or something to kind of befriend them?
No, I just tried to get them used to me, and eventually, and it was very sad, it was just 2 weeks after Mum left that I saw this one famous chimpanzee, very handsome. I called him David Greybeard. He was the first one to lose his fear. And on this special day, I saw him using grass stems to fish termites from their nest.
So you're doing that, and the first night you're there, you're sleeping in a tent, I assume, or the first couple nights.
No, the whole time.
The whole time, but are you worried that they're going to come and attack you in the middle of the night?
They go to sleep at night.
Okay. So it never bothered you. But there was a time, I think, that one of them did attack you.
Oh, well, that's much, much later.
Later,
It was a dominant male, and he was a bully, and he was a bully to other chimps.
Okay.
And he bullied the field staff, including me, and I kept saying, Frodo, I know you're dominant. You do not need to prove it. You do not need to stamp on me and drag me.
Okay, does it get lonely out there? Just you and the chimpanzees? There's no cell phones, there's no anything. You didn't get lonely?
We didn't even have lab computers at that time.
So,
lonely? Never.
So all day, what did you do? All day just look at the chimpanzees, try to get close to them?
Tried to get close. When possible, I watched them with my binoculars. Sometimes I stayed out. If they nested, I would go back to have supper with Mum. Then I would go back up so that I could be near them in the morning. And I was scared of leopards. I think because I'd seen a trapped leopard who was being relocated, and he was so terrified and so fierce, and his eyes were so full of fear and hate, and he was leaping at the side of this live trap. But so we have, back then we had leopards at Gombe, and I would hear them at night when I was up there alone with my little blanket, and I would hear the leopards' hunting sound, and I think, pull the blanket over my head.
So did you ever say to yourself, how did I get myself into this? Or do you always say, I'm glad I'm doing this?
No, I was following my dream. They were the best days of my life.
So eventually you go back to Dr. Leakey and you give him a report on what you've learned. And in that report, you kind of changed the perception around the world of chimpanzees, because people thought at that time, as I understand it, that chimpanzees are not capable of making tools. Only humans could do that.
Right.
And you discovered they make tools for what purpose?
Fishing for termites, crumpling leaves to get water from a hollow in a tree that they can't reach with their lips. Then they get these long sticks which have to be very smooth, so they peel the bark. And then there are these vicious biting ants that we call army ants.
Did you ever eat the termites yourself? Are they tasty, or?
Well, I had to eat one just to say I'd done so. Oh. But then these biting ants, they're really, really bad and fierce. And so the chimps will go up, quickly dig at the nest, go up away as far as they can, put this long stick down, leave it for a moment, then and eat as fast as they can, because the ants are biting their lips, and it takes about 2 minutes, and they have to run away.
So after you gave your report to Dr. Leakey, he, I guess, sent it to somebody, and people said, how can this woman, not trained as a scientist, come up with a discovery that we famous scientists didn't know about? Is that the essence of the problem?
They were extremely arrogant, most of them. And you know, they were saying things like, well, she's just a girl, she's straight out from England, why should we believe her? One of them even said maybe she taught the chimps to use tools, which, as they were running away at the time, was maybe so stupid.
Eventually, National Geographic decides to get a photographer to come over?
Yeah, the National Geographic came involved after the tool using.
Okay.
After Leakey approached them, and they said, we will fund Jane's research after the 6 months' money runs.
Now, National Geographic came over and was able to get people interested in this because of what reason? Well, because you were an attractive woman, you said.
Well, this is what the scientists said. The scientists said, oh, well, you know, the Geographic's giving her money because they can put her on the cover because she's got nice legs. So okay. if that would happen today, there'd be a lawsuit.
All right,
back then, I just thought, well, I mean, it was a different world back then. And I thought, well, if my legs have got me the money to do what I want to do, which is study the chimps, thank you, legs.
National Geographic sent the photographer over, they took the pictures, it became a famous article, and then you became pretty well known. Did you decide to go back to England and do something else then, get your PhD?
No, Leakey wrote to me and said, I picked you because you had not been to university and your brain wasn't cluttered up with the very arrogant way scientists treated animals back then as mere things. But he said, now I want you to be respected by other scientists, so you must get a degree. But we don't have time for an undergraduate degree. I've got you a place in Cambridge University in England to do a PhD in ethology. Well, I didn't know what ethology meant.
So
the study of behavior.
So you skipped the undergraduate part and you got a PhD.
And I was very, very nervous. You can imagine, I'd never been to college. And just imagine what I felt like when I was told by the scientists, well, first of all, you shouldn't have given the chimpanzees names. If you're a proper scientist, you give them numbers. Right. Then they said, you can't talk about their personalities, their minds, or their emotions. Those are unique to us. They also said, you must not have empathy with your subjects, because a good scientist is objective, and if you have empathy, you can't be objective, which is rubbish.
All right. So, okay, so you got your PhD? You did get a PhD.
I got the PhD, but you know how I stood up to the scientists? I mean, I never argued with them. But what gave me the confidence was the teacher that I had as a child, who had taught me that in this respect, these erudite professors were wrong. And that teacher, that was my dog, right. Rusty.
And were there a lot of women scientists that were judging you?
There weren't almost no other women scientists back then. Nobody had studied chimps in the wild.
So you got your PhD. Did you say, now I'm going to teach at Cambridge, or did you decide to go back to Africa?
Oh, I was going back in between.
Okay, so you stayed, yes, you went back in Africa, and then...
Yeah, because I was still learning. We're still learning after 63 years.
So when you went back to Africa, or you're going back and forth, you're back studying the chimpanzees even more. You're spending more time with them. So let me ask you, for those who aren't experts, and I can't say I'm an expert, if I understand it, apes are a category of primates, and apes there are chimpanzees that are apes, there's orangutans, there are bonobos, right?
Bonobos, yeah.
And also humans, some people might say.
And gorillas.
And gorillas, okay. So gorillas and humans, some people would say. When did we part ways with other apes? In other words, humans, it is thought, kind of had this common ancestor with other apes, and maybe it was 6 or 8 million years ago or something like that. We went one way, and the apes went the other way, right?
Right.
So what's the difference between a chimpanzee and an orangutan? Why did you study chimpanzees and not orangutans?
Well, first of all, orangutans are solitary, and they're mostly high up in the trees, and also they're in Asia, and Leakey was Africa.
Okay. All right, that's a good reason. But the DNA of humans and the DNA of chimpanzees is 97%, 98% the same. Is that right?
98.7 or 98.6%.
Okay.
So that's humans, chimpanzees, and then the little chimp, the bonobo. We share, we're equidistant. And then next comes the gorilla, and then the orangutan, as far as DNA is concerned.
Now, gorillas are more complicated to study, I guess, because they're more dangerous than chimpanzees?
No, they're not dangerous.
No?
No.
They're not?
No, I don't think anybody's ever been killed by a gorilla. But chimpanzees hunt. Gorillas don't.
Now, chimpanzees, you discovered, actually are not quite as nice as you wanted them to be. They kill each other from time to time. Is that right?
Yeah, they have. The males are territorial, and if they see an individual from a neighboring communities at Gombe are about 50, and that individual will probably die.
And when you, let's say, go away, go back to England, come back, they recognize you, you believe?
Oh, yeah.
And how do they befriend you? When you come back and they like you, do they bring you a gift, or they bring you something?
No, I never wanted that kind of relationship. Diane Fossey with the gorillas, she did. But I wanted to, like looking through a window, I wanted to watch the behavior as it is, without me being in the picture.
Okay, so for many years, you're living in Africa, no electricity, no cell phones, no television, none of the important things you need in life to get by, right?
No, they're not important at all.
Okay. So like you cook your own meals. Where'd you get the food from?
No, we had a cook.
You have a
cook. Mum and I, when we first went, were told, you have to go with somebody, and you'd be better off with a cook. So there was a cook, the nearest little town to Gombe, which is along the lake, 12 miles, and we had a 5-horsepower engine. So it was quite, right. So in this nearby town, Kigoma, at that time it was a British-ruled place. Every single household had employed this cook. He was a brilliant cook, but he loved cooking sherry and cooking brandy, so he got fired. So they said, this is fantastic. Jane and her mother will have a wonderful cook. There won't be any alcohol. Well, it took him 2 weeks to find a very, very potent brew made of fermented bananas.
So did he ever cook any food that you would give to the chimpanzees?
No, we didn't.
You don't give them any food?
No. Well, we did start a banana feeding station, which you wouldn't do today. But back then it was the kind of normal thing.
Okay, so when you started this, there's some of your famous whiskey, right? This helps you. Right. So when you started...
David, this is for my vocal cord. I'm serious. I got a letter from a doctor. There are 15 ways that whiskey in moderation will help your health. And I mean it.
Okay. Well, what about for the chimpanzees? Do you ever give the chimpanzees any?
No.
They don't like it? Or they don't
They would love it.
They would love it. Okay. So when you started in 1960, roughly, there were, as I understand it, roughly 1 million chimpanzees in Africa. Now there are roughly 300,000.
Yep.
So where did the other 700,000 go?
Well, some of them went to medical research, which now, fortunately, eventually, they're all out in sanctuaries in the US. Some of them took a long time. Some of them were sold overseas as pets or for entertainment, circuses, zoos, and so on. Many others went to zoos in Europe and America. Many were killed for the bushmeat trade. That's the commercial hunting of wild animals for food. But this trafficking of animals, killing the mother to steal the baby, to sell the baby, is still going on.
There are people that come in and kill the animals for their meat, and the meat is used for feeding other animals, or what?
No, in some countries, chimpanzee meat is supposed to be very special. Not in Tanzania, fortunately. But the mothers who are killed for the illegal wildlife trade, they're not even, they're just left on the forest floor. They just want the baby.
Okay, so you're doing this in Africa. Does your mother ever say, maybe you could get married or something like that? And did she ever bother you about that? And you did get married, so she never said, come on back to England?
No, never.
Okay, but you did get married to somebody who cared about Africa, I guess?
Yes, Hugo van Lauwijk, the photographer, the Geographic sent. And he was the father of my one son, and I have 3 grandchildren.
And do they live in Africa?
2 of them, my son lives in Africa. He's working in Rwanda at the moment, building environmentally friendly houses. 2 of my grandchildren are in Tanzania, working for JGI, Roots and Shoots, and environmental education centers, that sort of thing. And then the 3rd grandson is in London, learning about environmental documentary filmmaking.
So none of them ever wanted to go into finance or anything like that? No, they weren't interested in that. Okay, so you're doing this. This is most of your life you devoted to the study of chimpanzees to make sure that they're better understood and better appreciated. But in recent years, you created an institute, the Jane Goodall Institute. And what is that designed to do?
Well, that was started in 1977. When by then I had a little research station, and 4 of my students were kidnapped, and everything shut down. And so some friends of mine said, well, let's start an institute so that this research can carry on. Bless them. So that was 1977, and it was set up to study, conserve chimpanzees and other animals and educate. And it's developed since then. So it's, we've got 27 Jane Goodall Institutes around the world. And then I realized at some point that the African people living in and around chimpanzee habitats right across Africa were struggling to survive. There was crippling poverty, lack of health and education, moving deeper into the forest, being exposed to diseases like Ebola and HIV from the chimpanzees and vice versa. And it hit me if we don't help these people to find ways of making a living without destroying their environment, we can't, conservation won't work.
So you've devoted a large part of the Goodall Institute to climate change and conservation, is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, right now, I mean, you know, we face these two existential threats, don't we? Climate change, which has changed weather patterns all around the world. We had the flooding yesterday, you know, day before yesterday, and then loss of biodiversity. And what people don't realize, we are not only part of the natural world, even though with our cell phones and virtual reality, we feel divorced from nature, but we depend on it for food, water, clothing, everything. But what we depend on is healthy ecosystems. And an ecosystem is this magical mix of plants and animals, each one with a role to play. So if you think of it as a beautiful tapestry, every time a species goes from that tapestry, it's like pulling a thread until the tapestry hangs in tatters, and then the ecosystem will collapse. And it's happening.
So you have a program that's called Roots and Shoots. What is that about?
Well, when I was beginning to travel around the world giving lectures to raise awareness about the problems of Africa, and at the same time learning about what we are doing in the developed world, you know, the pollution, well, you know, all the rest of it, I was meeting young people, even back in the late 1980s, who were losing hope. And some of them were, most of them were just apathetic, not seeming to care. Some of them were angry. Some of them were depressed. And when I started talking to them all around the world, they said, well, we feel like this because you have compromised our future and there's nothing we can do about it. So have we compromised the future of our young people? We've been stealing it since the Industrial Revolution. But I didn't believe there was nothing that could be done. I still believe, and I'm not alone among scientists, there's a window of time when if we get together, we can at least slow down climate change, slow down and restore biodiversity.
So you're spending a fair amount of your time letting people know about your institute, Roots and Shoots program. You are, public information, 89 years old, is that right?
89, yeah.
89, okay. There's a lot of people, when they turn 89, they want to kind of chill out a little bit and relax, maybe spend time with the grandkids or something, great-grandkids. You're not slowing down any at all? You're just sitting on the beach anywhere, going to Palm Beach or something?
Well, how can I? Because, you know, this may sound weird to you, but I truly feel that I was put on this planet with a mission. And right now the mission is to give people hope, because if you don't have hope, you give up, you become apathetic and do nothing, and then we're doomed. If our young people give up, we're doomed. So, you know, okay, so I don't know how many years I have left, but when I was young, I had this time, and now I'm coming up towards whenever the end is. Could be 1 year, could be 5 years, could be 10, could be 20, I don't know, but I'm getting closer. And so I have to speed up because there is so much I still have to do.
But do you ever, get up in the morning and say, I'm going to take a weekend off, I'm going to go to the movies, I'm going to see a show, I'll read a book, I will go to a nice restaurant, have a nice meal? You're never interested in any of that?
No, I think restaurants cheat you. You have to pay too much in a restaurant. So
Not in New York, it's
I'd give you a
inexpensive
secret.
here. What?
When I'm in a hotel, so I take maybe a little roll from dinner somewhere if I'm invited out to dinner. And do you know what you do with that in the morning? You turn your iron upside down and you put the roll on top of it, and you make toast.
So, you do that. So, but like when you stay in a hotel, I mean, you take the soap with you, or you guess you can't do that? You do.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I try to leave the little packets in these hotels. I take my own things so I can leave them for the next person. And I won't have room service. I mean, I won't have, you know, cleaning ladies do not disturb is on my door. Because, you know, they say put your towel on the rail and we won't wash it, but they can't even read English half the time.
Okay, but you've led a life which you're very happy with. Most people aren't as happy as you seem to be with what you've done in your life, and you want to do it for X number of years more, but there's no regrets about what you've done. I mean, nothing you should, but you're very happy. You're not wishing you did something else, right?
No, absolutely. I know I have to be doing this.
Now,
But get me wrong. Don't think I don't get totally exhausted.
Well, okay, so do you ever take the weekend and sleep in a little bit?
Do you know, during COVID, people wrote to me and they said, Jane, you must love this. You've got time to, you know, to kind of sit back and think. And 2 years, I did up to 4 Zooms a day, lectures and interviews all over the world. I didn't have one weekend off. I didn't have one holiday for 2 years. That's why my voice now needs whiskey.
Well, so if you could, if you took a holiday, where would you want to go? Where would you like to go, on a safari or something? Where would you like to go is there any place you want to go you haven't been?
Oh, there are places, like 15 years ago, I wanted to go to the wild places of Papua New Guinea, where new species, but I couldn't do that now. I mean, you know, I'm 90, nearly 90.
So when you were in a restaurant or you're in a hotel or you're walking...
I don't go to restaurants.
All right, you don't go to restaurants, okay. When you're not in a restaurant, when you're in a hotel or you're in airports, the people come up to you, and how do you deal with the people that want selfies all the time and autographs? So how do you be polite, but also kind of not deal with all that for many hours?
But you know, when it first began to happen, I was shocked. And so the only way I decided I could deal with it, there are 2 Janes. There's this one. This is me. I'm sitting talking to you. I'm talking to all of you, right? But then there's that icon that's been created, I know, by geographic discovery, blah, blah, blah. And I have to work really hard to keep up with that icon, Jane.
Okay, so to stay in shape, you look like you're in pretty good shape. You exercise a lot, but do you...
No, I don't.
You don't exercise? You don't exercise?
Only in airports.
You don't go to the gym and lift weights?
No, I haven't got time for that.
You don't have time, okay. Wow, okay. So, you know, there is a Barbie doll now that's named after you. Did you ever imagine that would happen?
Well, actually, I did imagine a doll dressed as Jane, but I'm upset with this Barbie doll because it's now become a collector's item. I wanted it for little girls and little boys to realize what one can do and to think how wonderful to be out in nature. But this one is now a collector's item, and I wanted all children to be able to have that Barbie doll, but now it's so expensive.
Oh,
and they're not going to make any more.
Okay, so today, if somebody wants to support what you're doing, I assume you've got a website, people can support you?
Oh yeah, janegoodall.org, and apparently on the way out there are tables with information and brochures and all the rest of the stuff.
Do you take contributions, or you don't take any contributions?
I'll take any contribution.
Okay.
Hand out.
Okay, well, let's see. Let's see, okay. As long as I don't have to live with the chimpanzees, I might be willing to contribute a lot. So if I went to see the chimpanzees, and by the way, you say chimpanzees, and Americans say chimpanzees, I think. What's the correct?
No, it's the other way around. I think we say chimpanzee, you say chimpanzee.
Right, okay, chimpanzee. But you say chimpanzee.
No, we say chimpanzee.
Okay, all right, well, you probably know how to pronounce it better than I do.
Have a whiskey.
Okay. So today, you have a fairly exhausting schedule. You're going from event to event, but how frequently do you get back to Africa? Every couple of weeks you're back there now?
Twice a year, because my family's there partly, and because I need to go to Gombe. But we also have a big sanctuary for orphan chimps in Congo. We have another one in South Africa. There's one that we basically are involved with in Uganda. And I need to go back there. I need to give support to the staff there. Gombe, I go back, and luckily my family, my grandchildren can come with me, so it's time.
But if you go back to Gombe now, and you want to look for some chimpanzees, would you find some that you already knew you? And would they recognize you still?
There is just one mother and her daughter that I knew. And, since I only go back like 3 or 4 days at Gombe at a time, I don't know the new ones.
Right.
I don't know the children and the young ones. But Gremlin, I knew intimately when I was still working at Gombe.
Obviously, they can talk to each other, but is it possible that humans can convey some type of language to chimpanzees or teach them how to add? Wasn't that what you were working on at one point, teaching them how to addition or words? And how did that work?
Well, I never have, but chimpanzees have been taught sign language, and they can learn up to about 700 words that deaf people use. And from that, you can learn fascinating things. Like, for example, some chimpanzees love to paint or draw. Not all of them, and these are captive ones, of course. But one young chimpanzee, she was 4 years old, and she used to fill her page with lovely lines of different colors. And on this occasion, she made a drawing like that. And so her teacher handed the paper back and signed, "Finish." So the chimpanzee looked at it and handed it back and said, "Finished." And so this went on about 2 times. And then the teacher had the brains to say, "What is it?" And the chimpanzee signed back, "A ball." Well, a human, if doing a ball, would do a ball, right? What's the chimp done? The bounce. And that gives you a whole new feeling of looking at the world through the eyes of a chimp. She's drawing the movement.
Wow. So why do you think people are so fascinated by what you have achieved in your life? I mean, when you were doing this, you didn't do this for world acclaim. You were doing it because you were interested in it. But it turns out the world is fascinated by what you've done with your life. Why do you think that is? Is that people love chimpanzees, or like the dedication you've shown, or they just admire your courage to do this? Why do you think you're so beloved?
I think you should ask somebody else.
Okay,
I don't think that's for me.
All right, well, here's...
some people are fascinated by the chimp, especially children. Some people love it that I was a woman. I think of myself as a human. I don't care about the male-female bit.
Oh, really? Okay, so you think a man could have done this better than you did this? No.
Well, there are amazing male people studying apes, but it just happened it was me.
Okay. So there's one that you named after me, it seems. How did you meet David Greybeard?
Well, I didn't know you back then, unfortunately.
Okay. So that's... All right, so, but is he still alive?
No, he died long ago.
How long? What's the average life expectancy?
They in the wild, 50 years old. The oldest one in captivity was 74.
Oh, wow.
But in the wild, their teeth get worn down when they get internal parasites and things like that. But they quite often live over 50 in the wild.
The mating process, which is that, what age do they mate, and is that a complicated process?
The male becomes physically mature when he's about 9, but he's not socially mature, so he doesn't really get a chance to mate until he's about 13, something like that. So, same with the female.
Same with, like humans, they become physically able to do something before they're socially able,
yes,
right?
That's right.
Particularly with men. Okay. So I'm grateful and awed that you have the energy to travel and inspire. Are you confident when you pass the torch that those to whom you pass the torch will match your devotion?
That's what Roots and Shoots is all about. Roots and Shoots is creating young people who, once they understand the problems, and we empower them to take action, there's no stopping them, because they're passionate, they're committed. Some of them are in some countries, very courageous.
Right.
And, Roots and Shoots is about deciding what you want to do to help people, to help animals, to help the environment, rolling up your sleeves and taking action. It's all about taking, and it's what gives me the most hope, David, traveling around the world. Everywhere I go, there are young people, so motivated.
So here's a question that says, can you talk about parenting? So the average parent is not you. You did things differently than other people. So how did you raise your children? Did you, do their homework with them, or did you read to them, or did you teach them about chimpanzees?
That's my question, and what I really hope you'll do is talk about how your parent parented you, and then how you parent, and what you learned from the chimps.
Okay, well,
So,
so talk about parenting.
First of all, I only have one son.
Okay.
And I think he was a little dyslexic. It was very hard for him to learn to read. I tried homeschooling him. He was at Gombe with me. Then we had various students come out and work with him. And eventually, he went to school in England, living with my mother. So it was like the extended family. And then he decided he wanted to go to boarding school when he was 10. And he loved it. He used to start singing at the end of the holidays. But we were together every one of his holidays, he and I.
So here's a question that says, what is the most important thing to teach my daughter, Sarah, about her part in our future? What would you like young girls to learn about what they can do, and how would you suggest they follow what you've done?
Well, I would say that they all should be told what my mother told me. If there's something you really want to do, then you have to work really hard, take advantage of every opportunity, and if you don't give up, hopefully you find a way. But for all of us, it's the main message of Roots and Shoots,
right,
which, by the way, I didn't tell you. It's now in 68 countries around the world, and we have members. We have members in kindergarten, even a few in preschool, but kindergarten, university, and more adults, like the staff of a big corporation, right, like senior citizens. And the main message is every single one of us makes some impact on the planet every single day, and we get to choose what impact do we make.
So people that contribute to you and your foundation, or institute, are they individuals, is it government organizations, nonprofits, and you take, I guess, gifts of any size, but would you get large gifts from wealthy individuals from around the world, or?
Yeah, and as I say, there are 27 Jane Goodall Institutes, but yes, we do get gifts, like from America. USAID is really helping us with our programs to alleviate poverty and to conserve biodiversity and save and restore forests.
So have you ever been to Washington, D.C. Much? Do you go there much?
Oh, I've done so much lobbying there.
Okay.
Yes.
You find meeting with members?
Right now, I haven't been doing any lobbying.
So do you find meeting with members of Congress uplifting, or not so much?
It depends who I meet.
Okay. So today, your main focus is to get the message out about what you're doing and what you've done and what your institute's doing. Today, what is the biggest question that you have about that youth, of young people? Do they question whether doing the kind of thing you did with your life is a good thing, or they're inspired by what you did and more people want to do the kind of thing you did? Or do people say, no, I'd rather go into hedge funds and private equity or something like that?
Well, the most important thing is, it doesn't have to, you don't have to go into zoology, you don't have to go into conservation to help the environment. It's how you live each day and what you decide to buy or not buy. Those are the kind of things that affect all of us. And of course, if you're in real poverty, you can't afford to make choices we can make. We can say, I'm not going to buy that because it harmed the environment when it was made, or it was cruel to animals like industrial farming, or it's cheap because of unfair wages. We don't have to buy it. And that consumer pressure is beginning to change big business.
Now, did your parents live to see your success? Did your parents live long enough to see how...
I didn't hear that.
Did your parents live long enough to see your success?
Well, remember that my father, after I was 12, I hardly saw him. But yes, he did. And we did continue to, meet each other from time to time. In fact, he married again, but every Sunday he used to creep away from the house, leaving his wife asleep, to call my mother. I mean, it's so funny.
And your mother?
Kind of sweet. But Mum, she definitely lived long enough. And you know something? One reporter said to her, "Are you proud of your daughter?" And she said, "What would you say if I said no?"
What about your grandchildren? What do your grandchildren call you?
My
Grandma?
grandchildren.
Your
my
grandchildren?
I'm really proud of them. They're doing super well, all of them. And
Do they call you Grandma Jane, or what do they?
no, they call me Gadge.
Oh,
Gadge. Gadge was because my sister, her daughter, had 2 boys, so I was Great Aunt Jane. I didn't want to be called whatever, Great Aunt, so I shortened it to G-A-G, Gadge. And then I thought, well, that's kind of a nice name.
so some people in Western society and other societies seem to gravitate towards making money. You could obviously make a lot of money by doing lots of things, but you don't seem to be that motivated by money, as I can determine from talking to you.
I'm tremendously motivated about money to continue our program.
For your institute, but not for
Not
yourself
for me.
personally. You're not looking like buy a big home or something like that.
No, our home is a 1872 old Victorian brick house in Bournemouth on the south coast of England, where my sister permanently lives with her family. It's kind of falling to bits. It needs new windows, but the money that I make for myself is not much, and that's used to give young Tanzanians an opportunity to go to university or even to go to school or things like that.
So if you could do your life over again, would you do something different, anything different? Would you have done something different than you did, or you're pretty happy with what you did?
I think I'm pretty happy with what I did.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, well, obviously, you're very, very popular here. I assume popular all over the world. So this popularity, I guess you're used to it by now. But again, you never expected it when you were first exposed to what you were doing, right?
I think if I'd known what I had to be doing, I would have I don't know what I'd have done. I mean, I was really, really shy as a child. And this kind of thing, when I first had to give a talk, I was terrified for about 3 weeks ahead of it. But I made a vow. When I had to give that very first talk, which was in Washington, D.C., in Constitution, well, it was called, I think it's called DAR now, D-A-R, and 5,000 people, my first talk. And I practiced with my family, and I said, okay, I will never read a speech, and I will never say and
Well, you've done a pretty good job, I would say, in learning that lesson. So today, would you do you expect to spend the rest of your years mostly in Africa, would you say?
No, I will spend the rest of my life doing what I'm doing now, which is traveling around the world. And okay, flying is, it's not environmentally friendly, all this flying, but our Roots and Shoots programs are planting millions of trees, and they're absorbing the carbon dioxide from my flights. And I do not fly on private jets.
So you're worried very much about the conservation, so I take it you are not a meat eater.
No, I was a vegetarian back in the late 60s, and I'm now more or less a vegan. Sometimes it's a bit difficult.
Okay. And you think that's healthier for the society?
But David, this thing about, I stopped eating meat when I learned about the factory farms, the confining of animals in these tiny spaces, which when I went to Africa didn't happen. Farms were, animals were out in the fields. And the next time, having learned about factory farms, that I saw a piece of meat on my plate, I thought, this symbolizes fear, pain, and death. Because thanks to the chimpanzees, helping science to understand that we are part of the animal kingdom, you know, we now know it's opened a whole field of investigation into animal intelligence. Right. That's why these people come with me.
Right.
So, first of all, we know about intelligence in apes and elephants and dolphins. Ratty. Now, rats have a bad reputation, especially in New York. But if you look up 5 smart rats, ignore 5 ways to kill smart rats, but look up 5 smart rats. He represents a giant hero rat in Tanzania. And they have been trained to detect the explosive in landmines, TNT, when it's buried deep under the ground, left there after the civil wars. And they've been responsible for helping to clear the whole of Mozambique. They're now working in Angola. And I've watched them being trained, and it's completely amazing. Oh. And then, you know, we're talking about factory farms. This is cow. And, you know, so cows, when they're being bred for milk or meat, you know, they're sentient beings. They have a personality. If allowed, they have wonderful bonds with their offspring. I've seen cows playing football with their owners. Right. The owner throws a football, and the cow chases after it, mooing with fun, and then butts it back so that it can be thrown again. And, you know, so what I'm saying about factory farms, it's not only cruel, but huge areas of land are cleared to grow the grain to feed them. Masses of fossil fuel with all its emissions of CO2 used to get the grain into the ground, the finished grain to the animals, and the animals to the abattoir, and the bits of animals to our table. And then finally, you know, cows in particular. That's why I carry cow. When I'm talking to children, I say cows belch out, you know, food in, belch out, gas comes out the other end, right? And that's methane. It's a very virulent greenhouse gas.
So have you ever thought of endorsing a particular brand of whiskey? You have, is there...
If they will give us enough money.
You would. Yeah.
Johnny Walker.
Do you have a favorite brand, or?
Well, Johnny Walker Black Label is a really good one.
Good. Okay. So you're also not a big fan of makeup, is that right?
Big fan of?
Makeup. You don't...
You see it?
I say you're not a big fan of that, right?
No.
You think it's not necessary, right?
Well, just a little, so that you know.
Okay.
If I got a big mosquito bite that's red, I put some concealer over it. I don't want to look as though I've got smallpox.
So why don't we conclude by reminding people, if they want to contribute to your institute, they can go on your website, make a contribution, and if they want, they can learn more about what your programs are by getting in contact with the Institute. Is that right?
Yes, janegoodall.org, pretty easy. When you do the www bit, which I have no idea what that means, but...
So tonight, we're going to finish now, and so you're going to go out and go to a big Broadway show tonight, or do something exciting like that, or just...
No, I'm commanded to go to a dinner.
Oh.
But the lovely thing about the dinner is Ban Ki-moon will be there.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, but no meat is served, right?
So, Ban Ki-moon endorsed the fact that I should continue to be a UN messenger of peace. And that was because of Roots and Shoots.
Okay. Well, look, let me just say, on behalf of everybody here and all Americans, everybody on the face of the earth, thank you for what you've done, and real tribute. Thank you.
Thank you, David.